We are often encouraged or organized or forced to work in teams. Hopefully, we've all had team experiences that we think of fondly. What I'm sure of, though, is that we've all had team experiences that were, less than awesome. On this episode of the Communicative Leader, we're going to look at why many teams just don't work, but we're not going to leave you there, my friends. We're going to go a step further to consider what we can do to set them up for success. Hello and welcome to the Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah OH. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On the Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. Many of us have grown up with this reverence to teams, right? As Diane Cotu put it in a Harvard Business Review article, even in a society as fiercely independent as America, teams are considered almost sacrosanct. Why do teams have this almost holy aura surrounding them? Well, the underlying hope of team-based work is that we can accomplish more than individuals could alone. So in theory, not only should teams be able to produce more than an individual or a collective set of employees working individually, but we rally around the idea that two or more heads are better than one. We will be more innovative. We're going to generate more creative ideas via our brainstorming and piggybacking than we would on our own. Though, my friends, if teams are the vehicle for efficient, effective, and pioneering work, why do they get such bad raps in the workplace? Even in the university setting. Why do so many elect to work alone if given the chance, when team-based work on paper would seem to lighten the load? Well, because oftentimes teams just don't work. We want them to, and like we said earlier, in theory, they should make our lives easier and our organizations more effective. But a lot of times we're left with headaches. One or two people who feel like they are left carrying the team. And oftentimes this is what happens. Hurt feelings, missed meetings, and time wasted trying to make sense of all these challenges. So today on the Communicative Leader, I want us to focus on what is a team and how is it different than a group. Several reasons teams don't work. And 3, we're going to review some strategies that will hopefully set you up for success. Teams versus groups. So why is it important? Well, in a moment, we're going to explore some reasons that teams don't work. And part of the reason why is because a lot of times we throw a collection of people together, give them a directive if they're lucky, and then we get frustrated when they don't perform the way we'd hoped. So weird, teams don't always work out as expected, huh? Well, part of the challenge is most often we are in groups in the workplace setting, not in teams. Groups have shared goals, interdependent tasks, and mutual influence. Typically 3 to 15 members or so. We meet frequently, and the success of our group, it depends on the quality of the communication we share as members of this group. Typically, we have detailed discussions and then we delegate the work, a divide and conquer, if you will. And usually we have one appointed leader or someone just tends to emerge naturally and we kind of rally around them. Sounds familiar, right? Probably nodding as I was going through this list, like, yeah, that sounds about right. Well, that's a group, my friends, not a team. So how is a group different than a team? Well, I'm glad you asked. When we think about teams, I want you to think about your favorite sports teams. Even if you're not into sports, that's fine. It can range from a professional level outfit to your kiddo's club basketball team. Teams win and lose collectively. In teams, we have specific positions or roles that we play. In teams, we see shared leadership and the flow of leadership between line changes. Is offense on the field or is it defense? Are we winning? Are we losing? Teams discuss and decide on plays, and they must work together collectively to be successful. Individual and collective accountability reign. So let's return to groups for a second. We've all been in these groups where someone, maybe it was us or someone, one of our teammates are just so fed up with the group, they finally say, oh, I will do it myself. And they stay up all night and singularly or with one or two others execute all of the tasks for the group's work, whether a proposal, a presentation, whatever the end product is. Well, can one or two players on the team do the same? Can they say, forget you, and orchestrate a win on their own? Not likely. Even if we have one player who can score a ton of goals or make a ton of baskets or touchdowns, what if the defense or the goalie isn't showing up then? If they aren't holding their own individual accountability or performing their role to the best of their ability? Doesn't likely matter how many points our team scores if the defense is non-existent, for example. Now that we have an idea of how groups and teams are alike, and more importantly, for our discussion today, how they differ, we can dive into some common reasons why teams just don't work or don't work the way that we hope they would. These common reasons are offered to us by J. Richard Hackman, a professor of social and organizational psychology at Harvard University. Hackman is a leading expert on teams. One quote from Hackman that I think about often and I come back to is this idea where he says, I have no question that a team can generate magic, but don't count on it, right? So of course we have this synergy and we should be able to collectively end up with something much greater than what we could have done individually. But most of the time that doesn't quite happen, does it? One of the reasons why I really like this quote is that it's a helpful reminder that yes, of course, teams can be really incredible. He is not discounting that. We're not discounting that. But what this quote is suggesting is that more often than not, we don't necessarily set people up to be successful in teams. We don't give them what they need. Hackman tells the story of being a doctoral student in a group dynamics course, and his professor put an equation on the board. So right now you're thinking, what the heck? You're going to give me an equation? I am, but it's really easy and really important. So hang with me. So AP equals PP minus PL. What? Yes. Okay, my friends. AP, actual productivity, equals PP, potential productivity, minus PL, or process loss. So let's dissect this. Actual productivity. This is what we're going to end up with. This is the outcome of the group's work. Our potential productivity, theoretically what this group is capable of considering members' expertise. Then finally, our process losses, coordination issues, motivation loss, all of the time that goes into trying to get everyone together and on the same page. So what Hackman was wondering about is, where's this other variable? He was thinking of it as process gains, or PG. So this idea that, well, of course, if we're working collaboratively, there should be some sort of gain, right? There should be some sort of benefit. This magic, the energy of the team, the synergy. So Hackman, really intrigued by teams, and over the course of several research projects, ended up forwarding mistakes that managers make in designing and leading teams. Mistake number 1, use a team for work that is better done by individuals. Oh gosh, this happens a lot. It also makes me think of all of those meetings we sit in that, again, could just be an email, right? So let's think about the writing process, for example. So it can be helpful to enlist individuals for ideas before the project in terms of brainstorming, and maybe afterwards for a check-in or trying to figure out, is this actually going to meet our audience needs? But sitting around a conference room trying to collectively write is rough for all parties, right? Hackman also tells us that this idea of executive leadership, so for executing ideas and decisions, that's another task best accomplished individually. It's not to say that one person should hold all power over decision-making and implementation and creative generation. But my friends, what if we take a step back to consider the end goal and thinking about these different paths to completion? We need to revamp a brochure, let's say. What do you think, right? We can engage in some brainstorming. That gives us a chance to consider letting someone else lead the project and then getting buy-in and additional camaraderie on the team. Boom, right? Okay, my friends, our second mistake. Call the performing unit a team, but manage members as individuals. Okay, the way I want to explore this mistake is via an anecdote, so bear with me here. I help coach a kid's soccer team. Again, hang with me. I promise we're getting to a point. But imagine if I called each of them over individually every time a play wasn't executed correctly. What if I had 12 individual conversations every time I wanted to try something new, switch positions, discuss strategy? See where I'm going with this? It would suck up all of my practice time and some, and more importantly, just why. If this is a team, the team needs to be communicated to collectively. They need to hear feedback together, make sense of suggestions together. This is part of the beauty of teams, my friends, this collective learning, the shared decision-making. So I'm telling the story about these adorable little bluebirds that I help coach, and you're thinking, of course you wouldn't have 12 different conversations every time a performance issue popped up. But if it's so easy to see this when we're thinking about youth sports, why do we do this in the workplace? Hey, I'm not knocking anyone. I get it. Relationships can be tricky. Time is a precious commodity. So if it's easier to connect with a couple of people individually as we catch them in the hallway, at the tail end of the meeting, I get it. But generally speaking, we need to commit to treating the team like a team, not as a loosely coupled group of individuals. Our third mistake is this idea of falling off the authority balance beam. This can be a tricky situation. You're leading an ad hoc team, but you're still in your home department where you're not the manager, right? So other ways we see this is to tell teams that they have formal authority, whether it's changing policies or organizational procedures, access to spend funds in certain ways, or even in terms of decision-making power as they navigate teamwork. But what happens is when we believe we have some measure of autonomy, only to recognize we can't actually move to the next stage until another organizational member approves it. Or we don't actually have access to those funds, but instead, we can write a persuasive proposal for why we think funds should be used. And instead of actually changing organizational policies as we were charged with when we were brought together in this team, we now realize that we're making some recommendations to those in the C-suite who may or may not agree, who may or may not move on these suggestions, and if we're being honest, my friends, may or may not even look at them. I really don't mean to sound so pessimistic here, and it's really not in my nature to do so. But the thing is, working in organizations, especially those with multiple layers of hierarchy, can be confusing and frustrating to just about everyone. So how do we make this right? If we oversee assembling a team, then it is also our responsibility to be explicit with expectations. So I want us to consider expectations, and we're going to do so with two different options here. So option one, this would be a leader meeting with a group of individuals who have been tasked with being part of a team. As you know, our campus is going smoke-free. With that in mind, you've been picked to lead communication efforts. Can't wait to see what you come up with. Okay. Well, we might feel excited. It sounds like we have a lot of freedom, some autonomy. Feels like we've been selected for our unique expertise, maybe our experiences. I don't see any guidelines or clear direction, though. And that momentary empowerment that we may feel is likely to quickly deflate as we start connecting with others to try and figure out what this ambiguous ask is, and then to try to accomplish it. So let's consider another option. As you know, our campus is going smoke-free. The university's marketing and communication department is overseeing the campaign and rollout for all stakeholder groups. But as members of student government and leaders within student groups, you've been selected to help brainstorm ideas for how to write messages for your peers, for other students. With vaping on the rise, we want to make sure our students know the harms, but also the possible consequences of vaping on campus grounds. Today, we're going to get to know each other. We're going to talk about team goals. And then for the next 3 Wednesdays, we will meet to work on the goals that we set today. So what do we see here? What's different between these two different asks by someone convening a team? Well, we know why and how the team was assembled. If we tell people why they are important and what we're looking to them for, it's easier for them to fulfill those roles. The Pygmalion effect is one of my favorite theories to think about and enact. And before you think theory, I'm checking out for the next 30 seconds. Come on, hear me out. This one is really cool, I promise. So simply put, the Pygmalion effect, it suggests that what a leader expects from his or her or their employees is likely what they're going to get. So even more simply stated, if you set clear and high expectations for your employees, they're likely to perform at a higher level than if A, we didn't set expectations, or B, we don't encourage them to try and stretch and to grow. So again, back to our examples. By telling people they are selected because they are leaders, because they are involved, it is a great way to recognize them, 1, and 2, give them an outlet to use those skills. Tell them the expectations for the day and for future meetings. Tell them the specific focus, right? In this case, connecting with their peers. Let them know their work is part of a larger campaign, hopefully dispelling some worries or fears of having to shoulder too much. Simply put, give teams what they need, in this instance, clear direction and expectations. Mistake 4 is a follow-up on the previous. So whereas in mistake 3, we take away team authority and autonomy, mistake 4 is the opposite. We just don't give enough structure. So many managers mistakenly think that by removing themselves from the equation, from convening a team, taking a step back, and being fully hands-off, they're empowering the team. But actually, the opposite is often true. Too little structure is a challenge, not a strength in most cases. Without an appointed leader, without a structure, without a clear task or clear deadlines, it can be exceptionally hard for a team to get off the ground. When we leave a team to work out all of those details on their own, oftentimes this is all they end up doing, getting stuck in setting up a structure that should have been provided for them, or at least started for them by the authority who called the team. When we think about creating structure, my friends, I want you to focus on 3 factors. These are really simple. I love these because they're easy for us to see and fairly easy for us to enact as well. 1, I want you to think about a well-designed team task, one that engages and sustains member motivation and skills. Who are you calling to the table? What is it that they do well or better than anyone else? And how is it that we recognize them for this skill set? 2, well-composed group, right? Do you have the right people, the right skill sets, the right group makeup? Those who complement each other instead of replicating each other. A lot of times we end up being in groups where we have the same skill sets as those sitting to our right and left. Well, does that really make sense? 3, clear and explicit specification of norms for group behavior. What does this mean? How do we interact with each other? What do we as a group do, right? So a clear list. We listen actively. We are responsible for our individual and collective deadlines. We rally around a shared goal. What is on the list of what we never do as a team? We don't interrupt. We don't dismiss others' ideas. We don't forget to consider unintended consequences of decisions. Of course, group norms are going to evolve with time, but reserving some space, maybe just one initial meeting to outline these expectations, gives your team a solid foundation to work from. One thing that Hackman says about structure that I love is that it's not necessarily a question of how much structure does a team need or have, but rather is it the right structure? How do you know if you have the right structure in place? Simple. Does that structure enable and support collective work? Or does it make this collaboration just more challenging and more frustrating? All right, my friends, we're on to the fifth mistake already. Too few organizational supports. Sometimes we're pulled into a team and we're given a specific directive, sweet, clear objectives, awesome, yet we don't have the tools we need to be successful. Oh, how frustrating. Sometimes we can find ways to be successful, right? If we have the directive and the clear objectives, but it'd be a whole heck of a lot easier if those resources were provided from the onset. So what am I talking about here? One, we're thinking about a reward system that prizes collective performance. Remember how we talked a whole lot about individuals and how oftentimes we manage team as individuals? If we want a team to be successful collectively, we need to treat them, teach them, and reward them as a team. Another thing I want you to think about in terms of organizational supports, training and educational resources. Do team members need certain skill sets? Would it be helpful for them to participate in a training collectively? I also want you to think about the information systems. Whether this is something like shared space in Teams or software like Slack, implementing a shared system where we can schedule meetings, communicate in real time, share, collaborate on, and store collective documents. Finally, most mundane but necessary, space, staff, equipment, funding, right? These things all seem like givens, but again, we've been in teams where we recognize these things are missing. The final mistake we're going to consider, mistake 6, assume members have the skills they need to work together as a team. When we're thinking skills here, we're not thinking statistical skills or negotiation skills or another set of specialized skills in that way. We're thinking about the ability to work well with others. So as we said, we grow up on a diet of teamwork, right? So again, we're this culture that rallies around sports to project-based work that's done in classrooms. And don't get me wrong, this is certainly not a bad thing, but it often means we're making assumptions when it comes to teamwork. Often we assume that our employees come prepared to be great team citizens. It is recommended that newly formed teams enlist the help of another formal authority member, whether it is someone in the organization or even if we're hiring someone from the outside to come in. These team interventions can really be helpful, and they emerge at 3 natural points: the beginning of the project, the middle, or after a large success, and at the end. In the beginning, it's helpful to consider, like we've mentioned before, roles, related responsibilities, to begin to differentiate among members and learn each other's areas of expertise. That lets us move from a collection of individuals to a working unit where we know each other. We know everyone's strengths and how each member is going to contribute to the team. Another natural check-in point for having someone coming in and coaching us is in the middle, right? It is a great time to reflect on what is working really, really well and, well, what needs to be improved. It means that things that have been frustrating or counterproductive can be addressed. So maybe we recognize everyone is always running late to these meetings. So maybe we consider when to reschedule so we have full buy-in and participation. Finally, the third natural point is at the end or after a major aspect of the project has been completed. It can be helpful in terms of re-energizing a group that has continued goals to meet, but also as a helpful debrief and learning experience for groups that have met their natural conclusion. Because what happens? We tend to meet goals and we move on to the next and the next and the next. But taking time to celebrate those wins and discuss the process can serve as a springboard to greater successes and team member commitment. So we've looked at a number of mistakes managers make when assembling teams. We've also considered different approaches that could help to prevent these shortcomings. As Hackman tells us, putting together a successful team is pretty straightforward. You're thinking, come on, what the heck? I do not buy it. You've just told me all of the mistakes teams make. And yes, it is easy to succumb to one or more of those challenges we talked about. But we're also going to look at what we need for an effective team, and we're going to recognize it's maybe not as challenging as we expected. So what do we need? We need work that lends itself to a team, again, rather than just to an individual. Clear direction with a thoughtfully designed structure, including team membership and norms that are spelled out, where the team has a clear reward system and the resources they need to accomplish the work. Finally, with some strategic coaching or team check-ins at the beginning, midpoint, and end. Voila, that's it, my friends. Again, as with many things we talk about and we think about on the Communicative Leader, easier said than done. I know, but once we have direction, like we've talked about before, this is powerful. Knowing what we need brings us one step closer to meeting those team-based goals that we've fallen short of before. Or if we're already in a team that's successful, it's a great way to consider what, if anything, can we do to improve or be more sustainable going forward. This leads us to our communication focus for the week. I want to look at 3 Ds: debate, discussion, and dialogue. In teams, our communication is really, really important. Well, when isn't it? But again, in teams, we need to be especially mindful of our communication because it goes such a long way in forming a supportive, collaborative culture instead of a competitive, challenging one. I want us to think about 3 types of communication that happen frequently in teams and groups. Again, debate, discussion, and dialogue. So let's look at debate. Debate can be really healthy and really helpful. And like we've said before in the Communicative Leader, conflict can be a great thing too because it means we're passionate, we are engaged, and we're invested. Put simply, we care. But debate can go awry really quickly, right? Because a lot of times when we think of a debate, think of a presidential debate, for example, we tend to look for a winner and a loser. When we think of a debate, we usually have 2 or more opposing sides attempting to illuminate the other side's shortcomings. Oof. This also means that we tend to be more focused on our own point of view than what our partner or partners are saying. We tend to use these declarative sentences and assert our ideas. But if we're being honest, it can be pretty easy to cross over to being downright aggressive here too, right? We start to see a team that engages in debate too often, then it can lead to a more challenging environment. So now let's think about discussion. So discussion, it moves from 2 or more opposing viewpoints that are in contention to an exchange of ideas, opinions, and information. Our goal in discussion, we want to better understand an issue or clarify our understanding. Because our focus is on understanding, we tend to be active listeners and focus on exploring these multiple perspectives. The final D, dialogue. This is the gold standard here, my friends. While discussion included exchange of information ideas, dialogue goes a bit deeper. Dialogue includes collaborating in order to achieve a shared understanding, right? We're thinking team here. It means exploring our individual perspectives. That might mean offering personal experiences that we've had to help our teammates understand the assumptions that we're making and our personal ideas and suggestions as we work together to find common ground. In your team and group settings, think about these: debate, discussion, and dialogue. Well, it can feel really good to win. I get it. As in debate, is that what is really best for the team, or is that maybe best for you, right? My formal leaders out there, I want you to think about the mistakes we discussed today. Much of this is in your power to course correct for teams in your organization or your ad hoc groups. If we really want to simplify it, break it down to thinking about structure. Well-designed team task, well-composed group, clear and specific group code of conduct. All employees out there, teams can be so rewarding. They can add to our sense of self and really produce incredible results. If your team doesn't have what it needs, whether these are resources like space or coaching or specific do's and don'ts of engaging in the group, ask. My dad is famous for saying, if you don't ASK, you don't GET. Used to drive me nuts when I was younger, but it's something I can really appreciate now. Sure, your manager might not be able to grant all of their requests, but if these are going to help you and your teammates be successful, meet the goals in a more efficient way, organizational leaders will usually try to work with you on these. Next week on the Communicative Leader, I'm so excited to welcome Karen Cashin. She is an incredible leader and she works with a team of revolving members. What does that mean? Karen is the only permanent member and her teammates come on for rotations from 3 months to maybe 12 months, 18 months. Talk about a unique and challenging environment. But my friends, she is a leadership unicorn and we're going to have a lot of fun chatting with her. All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on the Communicative Leader.